We will begin with the 1-minute introductions. Thank you. Mr. Ternan, please.
My name is Jack Ternan. I'm a Democratic candidate for Texas Senate District 8. District 8 includes all of Plano in Collin County. It does not include the Denton County part. I grew up here in Plano, went to Plano Public Schools, graduated from Plano East in 2000, went on to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., and the University of Texas for law school. I'm an attorney in downtown Dallas. I do complex commercial litigation at the intersection of business law and public policy. We tackle tough problems every day, and we resolve them in a professional way. And that's not what's going on down in Austin. We have tough problems, and rather than resolving them, we just kind of kick the can down the road. And the reason I decided to run is because education is particularly important to me, and we're particularly kicking the can down the road there. We're not funding it adequately, and I have a lot of ideas that I'm sure we'll talk about tonight about how we can come up with some more money for education. And we also need more flexibility in our schools and get away from teaching to the test. So that's why I'm running, and I hope I can get your support. Thank you.
We will begin the question portion of the evening. Mr. Ternan, if you'll begin with the first question. Please name the 3 most important challenges facing the state of Texas.
I think the number one challenge is education. We've got to find a way to fund our schools and make them what we need them to be for the 21st century, and that includes both public and higher education. Number 2, I think we need to get health care costs under control. They're becoming a bigger and bigger part of the state budget, and they're essentially crowding out everything else. And then third, I think our water crisis is probably growing out of control as well. We need to find a way to meet our water needs both now and for the decades to come. On each of those issues, I'm sure we'll talk about education, so I want to talk about water. I'm a big fan of desalinization, in particular solar desalinization. You're seeing these plants being built around the world, but we're not doing them here in Texas. We actually used to be leaders in desalinization. El Paso has a groundwater desalinization plant, and we haven't built any of those recently, and I think we should look to solutions through technology rather than simply digging holes in the ground and praying for rain.
Are you open to alternative revenue sources to fund public education, and if so, what sources would you support using?
I think the answers you've heard have been instructive of why we haven't solved any of our problems. The question's about alternative sources of revenue, and everybody thinks taxes and can't think past that. Some of the things I'm running on are alternative revenue sources that don't involve raising taxes. I want to have a state-owned deposit bank similar to what they do in North Dakota. When the money comes in now from state taxes, it gets diverted and put into bank accounts at private banks, and then the private banks realize the gain on the time value of money. We do get some interest. But if you actually own the bank, the money is getting deposited in, you can return greater income for your schools. Another thing that some of the private schools are doing now, private high schools, is they'll go to school a little bit longer, 4 days a week, and then on the 5th day, the kid will be in a paid internship program, and that money will then come back to pay their tuition in the private school, and they're funding about 80% of their operating costs through internship programs. And I think public schools should offer the option for students to get placed in paid internship schools and then take some of that money back for their operation.
Thank you. Given recent reports that Texas spends $1,000 less per pupil on public education and ranks 45th in the nation, and taking into consideration that Texas has a high percentage of economically disadvantaged students, do you believe we are adequately funding public education? If not, how do you intend to address the funding issues?
I don't think we're spending enough on public education, especially when you're spending less per pupil and you're not accounting for increasing enrollment. That's just not going to work. We run some of the most efficient schools in the country in Texas. We spend pretty close to the last amount of per student funding, yet if you adjust for socioeconomic factors, we score above national averages. I think that we need to spend more if we want to get more, and I think our children are worth it. Yes, we're spending more per student now than we were when I was in school, but I'm spending more for milk, I'm spending more for gas. Costs go up. That's just the nature of the world we live in, and you have to adjust for rising costs if you're going to maintain the same level of services. So, as I said before, I have some ideas on how to raise money without raising taxes. I also think that we should get rid of the natural gas exemption, which costs the state $1 billion a year. It was a great idea when it was passed originally because it created our natural gas industry, and now we don't need the incentive anymore.
Thank you. What is your position on the numerous lawsuits regarding educational funding that are being filed against the state of Texas by school districts across the state?
I think that people turn to the courts because that's the only place left where you have any rationality in our political system. I handle complex commercial litigation all the time. You have smart people on both sides, and in the end, normally come to a resolution that makes sense. And the courts are trying to do that. The legislature, I've heard complaints about Robin Hood since it was enacted when I was in elementary school, and you would think that if every single time somebody runs on a let's get rid of Robin Hood platform, that in 15 years something would be done about it, but it never gets done. And the reason why nothing gets done is because we haven't figured out how is it that we're going to fund these school districts that have low property tax bases that can't afford to provide a basic level education for themselves, that they have to get support from the state. And that's what my job as a legislature is to find money for the school districts that need it so that Plano can do its own thing.
What is your position on local control of public education? And what do you think is the balance, or what do you think the balance should be between school districts and the state?
I think Ross Perot, when he set out to reform the school system back in the 80s, had a pretty good balance between local control and state control. The state sets certain courses that you have to teach, but doesn't, at the time, didn't necessarily say what you had to teach in them. And also, class size had to be 22 to 1 in elementary schools. I think those sort of things are good. Where we went wrong is that we started putting too many mandates in what you're required to teach, and we started to make everything based on the tests that are being given, so the teachers lost all discretion in the classroom. They're spending a lot of their time teaching to the tests, and they're spending a lot of their time giving the tests. So I think that we should try to eliminate a lot of the standardization that this state has been pushing on the curriculum. I also have an idea of giving more control at the campus level. Right now, everything is sort of done at the school district level. I'd like to create some advisory boards at the campus level to give input in on teacher evaluations and principal performance. Thank you.
What is your position on accountability and standardized testing? Do you believe that the STAR and end-of-course exams will meet the needs of Texas students?
My opponent and I may actually agree on something. I think that I remember when I was in school, I thought standardization and standardized tests were a waste of time and a terrible way of preparing me for what I needed to do when I got out into the workforce. I don't think they're useful for evaluating teachers, and they're not particularly useful for evaluating students either. I think the only way you can really have an effective accountability system is if you have input at the campus level from parents and other teachers, and find out who are the good teachers and who are not, and reward them accordingly, rather than trying to do it based on ghosts in the statistics of the test results.
In educating the whole child, how important to you are strong elective offerings, such as fine arts and athletics? Do you feel any of these are not necessary in public education?
I agree that electives are very important for a well-rounded person. I also think that Plano did a great job when I was going through schools and my brothers were going through schools. I remember my next eldest brother, he went to the clinical program at the various hospitals, and it was a great experience for him, and now he's a nurse. So I think that it's important to not only promote electives, but also to work on internships and public-private partnerships with the surrounding community to get people out of the schools and into an environment they're going to have to prosper in once they get out of school. I want to remind everyone that electives cost money too, so if you're saying that those are priority, you've got to find a way to fund them. And the electives have been getting cut back because we're not finding the right amount of money. So I think we need to focus on non-tax revenue sources and repeal some exemptions to find the money we need to maintain the high-quality electives and internship programs that we want to see.
Texas PTA just adopted a new resolution on recess last week. What is your position on recess and physical education as requirements for all students?
I loved recess as a kid, and I think all kids deserve recess. Part of the problem we have in our education system is that we're moving more and more towards standardization, and one of the only times the kids actually have an opportunity to explore and do all the sort of innovative things that they can do at their age is at recess. You learn to eat bugs or not eat bugs. You learn how to retrieve a ball from being kicked over the fence without your teacher noticing. All sorts of skills get developed at recess that you never learn in the classroom. And I think it's a shame that we're seeing a decline in recess time as more and more time has to be spent on teaching to the test.
Thank you. This will be the final question for this evening, and Mr. Ternan, if you begin. Do you agree with the decision made that Texas not adopt Common Core standards, making us only one of 2 states in the nation that have not supported this initiative?
I agree that we should not adopt the national standards, though I do think that there's a lot of things in the national standards that are worth evaluating that we missed when we adopted some of our standards. I think that we need to take some of the power away from the State Board of Education as well, because it's too politicized as to what the content of the curriculum should be. And they don't do a very good job of ensuring that the classes are vertically integrated so that you'll actually get tougher stuff, say, in 2nd grade than you do in 3rd grade on the same subject matter. That's the downside of not adopting national standards, but I think that if we gave the educators more input and took some of the politics out of the curriculum, that we could solve that at the state level.
That ends the question portion of this evening. We'll now begin with the closing statements. Mr. Ternan.
Again, my name is Jack Ternan. You can visit my website, Jack Ternan for Texas Senate or Jack Ternan for Senate. And Mr. Leach mentioned earlier Dolph Briscoe, Governor Briscoe, and how the problems of his day involved education, water, and transportation, and those are the same problems that we face today. Well, the difference is that Governor Briscoe was a Democrat. In his day, we actually solved the problems, whereas now we hear the same thing every year from the Republicans, and nothing gets done. I'm running because I'm very concerned about what my opponent, Ken Paxton, did in cutting the funding for schools, and I want to find a way to not only reverse those cuts, but provide more funding for our schools so that we can meet the needs of tomorrow. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to representing you down in Austin.